Growing a Spine, written by Nicc, and read for you by Eleanor Elizabeth. Summary. Izuku knocks his shoulder into the doorframe when he stumbles through, and Kacchan looks up with an unimpressed blink, fingers in his mouth pressed tight to the moulded fangs. It's obvious why he retreated from the party. Izuku sighs out in relief and makes room for embarrassment in his lungs as Kacchan stares. "Oh, sorry, you just looked uncomfortable back there, so I thought I'd to fix my teeth." Right. They go quiet. Izuku rocks back and forth on his heels, feels the silence cloud the space between his ears, and swallows. Silence with Kacchan aren't quite as awkward as they are thick under his tongue. He chews the corner of his thumbnail and thinks to leave, but Kacchan speaks. "Your costume's stupid." Izuku and Katsuki get drunk and sleep together at a costume party. Izuku assumes that Katsuki regrets it. Izuku knocks his shoulder into the doorframe when he stumbles through, and Kacchan looks up with an unimpressed blink. Fingers in his mouth pressed tight to the moulded fangs. It's obvious why he retreated from the party. Izuku sighs out in relief and makes room for embarrassment in his lungs as Kacchan stares. "Oh, sorry, you just looked uncomfortable back there, so I thought I had to fix my teeth." Right. They go quiet. Izuku rocks back and forth once on his heels, feels the silence cloud the space between his ears, and swallows. Silences with Kacchan aren't quite as awkward as they are thick under his tongue. He chews the corner of his thumbnail and thinks to leave, but Kacchan speaks. "Your costume's stupid." It comes out blunt and clipped through plastic. Kacchan's never been one to mince words, but the protrusions from his upper and lower lip only emphasize how pointed he is. Izuku tugs at the fabric of the sheet around his shoulders and breathes through the heat around his collar. He's far past the hurt feeling. He is, but Izuku's still adjusting to any amount of Kacchan's attention, even the kind that's paid to produce an insult. If he meant nothing to Kacchan, it would be like he didn't exist. I thought I was going to have to work tonight, so, last minute and you forget to call off. Kacchan wrinkles his nose in obvious distaste, and he's supposed to be a werewolf, but the expression makes him look like a particularly offended cat. Curled hands in cotton, Izuku represses the wild urge to scratch behind his ears. "No," he says, "but you know my boss." Kacchan bares his teeth now. "I told you to grow a spine about that shit. Bastard should know you have a life. He can't keep holding you fucking prisoner just because everyone else in that department can't finish that shit on time. Next time, tell him to, I know, I told him no tonight." That indignation drops from Kacchan's shoulders and he flicks the tap on to wash his hands. Meticulous, soap, lather, between the fingers, under the nails. Izuku squeezes his eyes shut hard on the next blink. How strange it makes him feel to find everything down to Kacchan's base mannerisms attractive. Kacchan says. "Good." Kacchan flicks his gaze sideways, and his stare is heavy enough to hutch Izuku's shoulders. Little by little, Izuku's growing used to it, but in the moment, it's a weight all the same. "You binding?" Izuku's stomach turns over itself and goes sour. Self-consciousness is cold in his veins, that awful, rotten feeling. It doesn't come as often anymore, but it's worse when it does. Anxiety bubbles and clogs his throat. "No, is it obvious No, fucking relax. Can't see shit." It's not unconvincing, but it doesn't calm the dark clouds from forming in Izuku's head. Kacchan shuts the water off, and Izuku passes him a hand towel because he's closer anyway. His hands shake, and Kacchan sees, brow going pinched, mouth tight. "You were wearing it earlier," he says, a half step quieter than before, and it's this rare admission of concern worded in Kacchan's own way, the confirmation that he notices him, that lets Izuku breathe a little more, relax. Nothing to see. Kacchan just cares. "I'll kill you if you don't start taking more breaks." Izuku attempts a half smile. "I've been doing better, I swear." Kacchan knocks his shoulder on his way out of the bathroom. His eyes burn so red that if Izuku squints, he could almost look inhuman. The costume is fitting. "Come do shots with me," Kacchan grunts, and it isn't a request. Some tingling feeling sparks down to Izuku's toes, spurs him forward behind him. "Okay, Kacchan." Izuku wakes up cotton-mouthed, head pounding. The fullness of his bladder urges him to move, but the room feels colder than it should, some bereft feeling down to his bones, a notion of something missing that he doesn't understand. It hurts worse than the hangover screaming for water, for medicine, for something greasy on his tongue, aches enough to make him pull the comforter tighter around him and huff through his body's impatience a moment longer, just for the soothe of enclosure. Izuku blinks sleepily, hoping for a few more moments of dreams. Pain or not, his body is loud with the reminder that he could use a few more hours. Then, awareness floods all at once. The too bright sunlight peeking through the blinds illuminate a human-sized dent in the mattress next to him. Ah. Izuku rolls onto his back and stares blearily up at the ceiling. The fan turns slow, gently rustling a potted plant in the corner. He pops his wrists, then digs the heels of his palms into his eyes. He had sex last night. It's unmistakable. There's a satisfying ache in his muscles, between his thighs, a loose feeling in his hips that's rare but ultimately familiar. When he moves his head, he can feel the bruise of eager kisses on his throat. He doesn't remember this part much, but he remembers the shots with Kacchan. Quick ones, messily poured, clacked together on the living room floor, surrounded by their old classmates. Any number of people passed that bottle around, but Kacchan kept his body tight to Izuku's, hip to hip. He remembers Kacchan leaning in to whisper something in his ear, the warmth washing over the shell, and he smelled so good. Izuku remembers this for sure, leaning in to get closer to that scent, nose brushing the column of his throat, wet lips following. Kacchan had lost his train of thought mid-sentence, gone all sort of frozen, and Izuku kissed him again, up to his cheek to get to his mouth, alcohol warming his blood, proximity to Kacchan making him feel drunk. Kacchan kissed him back, made a soft, surprised sound in his throat, tangled a hand at Izuku's nape, and introduced teeth into the mix. Izuku remembers thinking how smart he was for it. They ended up in a guest bedroom, and maybe Izuku remembers a little bit. Kacchan laughed a whole lot, much more than he'd have ever expected. He bit Izuku in increments, squeezed tight into his skin, kissed him, and kissed him, and kissed him. And Izuku loved it. It was uncoordinated and through clothing, he thinks, and probably awful, but it was Kacchan, so it was definitely wonderful. Izuku allows himself a minute to sulk over forgetting the details. He had sex last night with Kacchan. There's a warm, fuzzy reflex of a feeling in his sternum at the thought, but his body hurts too much to lay and bask in it. It's a dazed sort of happiness that drags Izuku out of bed and to the bathroom. He pisses through it, brushes his teeth through it, stumbles back into the bedroom to get to the nightstand, where he's sure he left his lantern. It's as he takes in the contents that the first layer of his bubble pops. He finds painkillers, a glass of water, things that soften Izuku's chest at the centre, demonstrations of Kacchan's consideration. The note next to both is hastily scrawled and roughly torn. Where Kacchan found the paper, Izuku doesn't know. Noon. My place. There's no signature, but Izuku would recognise the handwriting anywhere, with his eyes shut even, would be able to pet along the marks of a pen pressed too hard to paper and know, Kacchan. Izuku was already sure, but it helps to confirm. It's real, concrete evidence of what happened last night, something external to his own romanticised thoughts, and it pops another layer. The clock on the nightstand reads that he has 2 hours until Kacchan's expecting him, and realisation dawns on Izuku in waves, forceful, unsteady, fizzing with worst-case scenarios. Izuku struggles to weigh his emotions before feeling them on a good day, and he pays for it now. As the thought fully processes, joy carves a tumbling spiral into dread in his gut. He had sex with Kacchan last night. The shower resets his nervous system enough to fully inflate his lungs again, and Izuku gains resolve staring at the tiles. Kacchan's had any number of volatile reactions in association with Izuku in the past, but at this point, they're friends? Izuku thinks he could maybe even call them that in front of him, if asked. The world won't upend itself when they see each other again. Kacchan will probably tell him to just forget it, which Izuku can do that. It'll eat at him every waking moment of his life, but he can pretend like it never happened if it means Kacchan will still have him around. It's far more preferable to never seeing him again, and the thought of that makes his stomach twist in knots. Izuku refuses to wallow in that pool. If he starts, he'll drown in it. He and Kacchan's relationship will survive this. If they can get through the minefield of middle and high school, they can get through getting off together. He talks himself down from a full-blown panic, but he can't fully extinguish the undercurrent of anxiety simmering in his gut. It feels like taking exams used to. Knowing the answer never stopped him from feeling nervous. He could only relax when he put down his pencil. Getting clean takes him the better part of an hour. Every minute that passes kicks his heart rate up a little higher, and the cold only offsets so much. The t-shirt and track pants he shoved into his overnight bag are wrinkled to hell, but the familiarity of the fabric is enough that he can lift his eyes to his reflection in the mirror, finally. He'd say he looked like shit, but at this point, he's seen all versions of himself enough times that they blend together. He looks tired, maybe? But those are his eyes, freckles there as they've always been. He's a little pale, but stomaching food before meeting Kacchan is out of the question. Nothing in his face indicates the things he'd done, even if it feels like it should. He certainly feels different. The only evidence is the marks that slink down the collar of his throat, but even those don't scream Kacchan. It's just the note and his memories playing in flashes. The water and painkillers help his pounding headache. At least the water does, and the painkillers will. Izuku continues to cling onto their presence as evidence of the impossibility of worst-case scenarios. If Kacchan hated him after last night, he wouldn't have gone to the trouble. Kacchan still cares about him. The impending rejection stings. Preemptive tears cloud his vision. He shoves the note in his pocket and blinks them away, frustrated at himself. Kacchan doesn't owe you that. The sunlight is still too bright, but Izuku jogs to Kacchan's apartment building anyway, because it's too close to drive and he doesn't have enough time to walk, and the crisp air burning his lungs always helps set his thoughts straight. Whatever pounding cleared from his head makes its return. The exertion sucked that glass of water right back out of him, and he rubs over his eyes as he comes to a stop, stomach throwing a fit. He probably stinks all over again from the sweat, but Kacchan is used to this. Izuku won't change the course of events to follow by showing up at his door squeaky clean. Getting up to Kacchan's floor is a blur, but it's quiet, and for that, Izuku is grateful. He doesn't think he could handle being stared at, wound as he feels to snap. Kacchan opens the door when he knocks, takes one look at him, and wrinkles his nose. "You look like shit." "Yeah, well," Izuku croaks, and fuck, he sounds like shit. "I ran here." "Obviously. Here." Kacchan shoves a water bottle at his chest and stalks off towards the kitchen, and Izuku processes the smell of eggs and rice, the apron tied around his waist at the back. "Probably forgot to drink water before you came last night, again." Izuku shoves the possibility of Kacchan making an innuendo right out of his head with force. He uncaps the bottle and takes large gulps, chastised. His body thanks him almost immediately, heavy fog dissipating somewhat. He doesn't confirm or deny what was said, because it wasn't a question. Kacchan already knows. "Sit," Kacchan demands, but he can't. Nervous energy crackles under his skin, and he struggles to take deep breaths, because Kacchan is here, in the flesh, making them breakfast in that silly Kiss the Cook apron Izuku bought him as a joke last spring, but that Kacchan has never failed to use in his presence. He wonders if he puts it on around Izuku just to play up the bit, or if he wears it alone, out from under any eyes, humming in the kitchen maybe, as he makes dinner for one. Not one, Izuku corrects, because Kacchan meets him on his lunch breaks when he can, bento in hand, in a permanent scowl that says that he knows Izuku forgot to bring anything of his own, and settled for the plan to make a pit stop at the lone vending machine on his floor, always thinking of Izuku, when Izuku forgets to think of himself. "Come on, asshole," Kacchan grumbles, settling 2 bowls onto the table, one across from the other, and he won't look at him. And he looks so good, so much better when Izuku's sober, and only seeing one of him. Izuku breaks. "We kissed last night," he blurts. It comes out too loud, too fast, too much. Izuku's teeth clack when he closes his mouth. Kacchan raises an eyebrow and abandons the coffee pot. His face twists up, and he sighs. "Take a damn bite." He's not trying to steer the conversation in one particular direction. He's not. But Izuku's stomach only coils tighter on itself at the dismissal. "I can't. Kacchan, I need to. Fuck." Kacchan turns away from him and fiddles with the 2 mugs. First one, then the other. He makes Izuku's coffee exactly how he likes it, and that's sort of the worst part about all of this. They're tied too closely. Kacchan takes such good care of him with zero obligation. Kacchan knows him better than anyone else ever has. Kacchan will never stop being someone that Izuku loves, so long as Kacchan keeps being himself, and asking for anything less than authenticity from him is impossible. No matter how this conversation goes, Izuku won't be able to swallow that part of him down. The back of Kacchan's neck is alluringly red, and Izuku bites his tongue over the urge to kiss it. It's precisely that sort of impulsivity that got him into this mess in the first place. "Yeah, so what if we did?" Kacchan mutters when he turns back, and is cautious. Izuku must make a face because he says, "Quit looking at me like that, I'm asking." Izuku sits down. Kacchan sets the mugs down so hard his own splashes and burns him, and he curses, closing his mouth around the side of his thumb. Red, wet lips, soft-looking. Izuku felt them firsthand, and he doesn't even remember it. Kacchan sits, picks up his chopsticks, glaring as they shake in his hand. Slowly, stray pieces come together in Izuku's mind. "Take a damn bite!" Izuku listens this time. He takes a bite, and it's good. Of course it is. It's steadying. The warm melts just a little bit of the ice in his belly. They eat in silence, and Izuku thinks. Kacchan keeps stealing glances at him, quick and searching. Izuku takes bite after bite until he's finished, and all the while he can't figure out what to say. More emotions lift from his chest every time Kacchan peeks at him with that guarded, expectant look, and it lets Izuku sit up straighter. If Kacchan wanted to forget last night, Izuku's almost certain he would have said so by now. Shut down the line of communication fast and efficient. No point wasting time over things that don't matter to him. Izuku prepared for that. Dying words on his tongue, a sharp ache, the lack of closure. Not Kacchan wanting for him to speak and clear the air. He didn't prepare for this. "You're such a bastard!" Kacchan finally snaps, after the silence draws out too long, thick and altogether suffocating. It shouldn't make Izuku's chest feel so light. "Why the hell do I gotta be the one to talk about this shit first, huh? You kissed me. You tell me what that means." Izuku sets his chopsticks down, and Kacchan hides behind his bowl as he takes his last bite. Kacchan swallows, then stands up, snatching their empty bowls with brows pinched, worry twisted around his mouth. Izuku blinks, and he turns the water on too fast, splashing down his apron. Worried he'll drop the bowls in the sink, Izuku stands too, the chair scraping across the floor. Kacchan flinches, and it squeezes in his chest. Izuku tucks himself behind him, slides his arms slowly around his waist, and they excel in tandem as his forehead settles between Kacchan's shoulder blades. Maybe it was cruel of him, unfair to expect Kacchan to fill in the gaps of the situation he created. Izuku kissed him first. Kacchan can't be the one to say it meant something. He tightens his hold to squeeze out the tension, and Kacchan lets him, shoulders lowering from his ears. Izuku decides to be honest. "I wanted to," he whispers, rubs his face back and forth along the fabric, the way he'd always dreamt of doing. It's freeing to check off so many desires in so little time. "It means I like you, Kacchan, and I wanted to, and I don't regret it if you don't." Kacchan is quiet as he rinses the dishes, shuts the tap, dries his hands, but for once Izuku isn't worried. It's comfortable to wait. Kacchan's always had to collect his thought before he opens his mouth. He can't quite spit them out at the speeds Izuku reaches, or won't. It would have been unsettling 10 minutes ago, before his face split down the middle and Izuku saw all the things he couldn't yet say. His hand is warm where it rubs just barely along the hairs of Izuku's arms. "Yeah, well," Kacchan says to the sink. "I don't." Izuku sighs, and it's like the breaking of a dam. He shifts up and presses his mouth to that heat at Kacchan's neck, and Kacchan's head falls forward and he breathes. "I don't remember enough, Kacchan," he murmurs. "I don't know what all was said, but I mean it." Kacchan turns around in his arms, kisses him first, and shifts the world entirely on its axis. It's a complete reversal of last time. Izuku finds himself wide-eyed and slack-jawed for all of a moment until his brain catches up with his body. He kisses Kacchan back. Hard, rushed, consuming, a fire in Izuku's belly that crowds his lungs in a pleasant blaze. Kacchan cradles the back of Izuku's head and paws into him, hand tight below his rib cage, and Izuku heats upwards from his toes, melts all the way back down. Kacchan leans so heavily into him that it bends him backwards, and Izuku rises up to meet him, gasping into a feeling so large it swallows him. He tangles his fingers into Kacchan's hair, and Kacchan holds tighter, breaking the kiss to bite the thickest part of his cheek. Izuku laughs, so Kacchan does it again, tugging at his curls. He pulls back to breathe, and Izuku sighs, nosing back into another, softer press of their mouths. "You fucking asshole," Kacchan rasps in the space between. "Always running from shit. I wasn't even sure you'd fucking show up. Had to leave before you did, because if... Christ, Izuku, if you'd walked out on me after all of that, I wasn't going to be able to... Izuku kisses his chin, then his cheek, and Kacchan closes his eyes, so he kisses over his eyelids too. "I have to come back to you," Izuku admits, and lets Kacchan tip his jaw, press his fingers into a bruise just under it. "I love you, Kacchan. If I came here today, and you said you wanted to pretend nothing happened, I would have tried. But I love you, and I would have said I could do it, but I would have lied." Kacchan exhales, harsh and loud, kisses his cheek. "Don't forget." He ducks, replaces his fingers with his mouth, and sucks a fresh mark, and Izuku goes limp in his arms, ghosts of memories waking under the feel of his teeth. "Don't forget a damn thing. Start over with me. Let me do it again right." Izuku's breath shakes in his throat. He digs his fingers into Kacchan's shoulders, tears pricking in the corners of his eyes. It doesn't hurt. It's a solace too big for his body. "Kacchan." Kacchan slides his mouth up to his ear and tugs at the shell with his teeth, then kisses it, softer than Izuku can physically handle. He thumbs behind it, over it, under Izuku's eye. "Come on, Izuku. Let me love you." He says it as if it isn't earth-shattering, as if Izuku would ever possess the strength to do anything else. "Don't leave me with a note this time," Izuku whispers, wet. Kacchan clicks his tongue. "Yeah, that's some stupid shit you do, isn't it?" He toys at the hem of Izuku's shirt, slides his fingers under it, drags his palm up his back. Izuku gives in to the urge to thumb at his ears, a sharp cheekbone. "Mean, Kacchan." "Tell me I'm wrong," Kacchan counters. He can't. "Kiss me again," Izuku asks instead. Kacchan does.